Captain Maya Reynolds stood at the helm of the UES Thunderchild, Earth's most advanced battleship, and tried to keep her expression neutral as another round of polite alien laughter echoed through the command deck. The Thunderchild represented humanity's finest achievement in military technology. 4 kilometers of reinforced alloys, state-of-the-art railguns, and enough missile batteries to level a continent. And right now, it was being thoroughly humiliated by what amounted to an alien traffic patrol. Perhaps Captain Reynolds, the Nexari vessel commander's translated voice, tricked with amusement. You should power down your kinetic weapons. The energy expenditure seems wasteful, given their effectiveness. Maya watched another salvo of hypersonic rounds disperse harmlessly against the smaller vessel's shields. The Nexari ship, barely a fifth of the Thunderchild's size, hadn't even bothered to move. Their energy barrier sparkled with faint purple ripples where the projectiles impacted, like raindrops hitting a window. Targeting computer confirms 0 penetration. Lieutenant Park reported from the weapons station, his voice tight with frustration. They're not even registering damage on their shield metrics. 3 days. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Coalition for 3 days, and already their greatest warship was being treated like a child's toy. The simulation was supposed to be a routine integration exercise, demonstrating Earth's military capabilities to their new allies. Instead, it had become an embarrassing technology gap demonstration. Fascinating design choice, the Nexari commander continued, their multiple eyes blinking in sequence, their species equivalent of a condescending head shake, using propelled metal fragments as weapons. We haven't seen that approach since. Well, I don't think we have historical records that go back that far. Maya's fingers tightened on the command rail. With respect, Commander, our kinetic weapons have proven highly effective in our solar system's defense. Oh, of course. The alien's translation matrix somehow managed to convey patronizing enthusiasm. Against other vessels using the same primitive technology, I'm sure they're quite formidable. But surely you didn't expect these. What did you call them? Rail guns. To compete with modern energy weapons. As if to emphasize the point, the Nexari ship fired a casual burst from one of its point defense arrays. A pencil-thin beam of coherent light lanced out, slicing through the Thunderchild's strongest shields like they weren't even there. Warning klaxons blared as the beam carved a precise groove along the hull's port side. Hull breach, Deck 7. Park called out. Minimal damage, but they barely used any power for that shot. The Nexari commander's voice took on an almost parental tone. The Coalition appreciates Earth's enthusiasm. Truly, your species has accomplished remarkable things, achieving spaceflight and basic energy manipulation in such a short time. But perhaps for now, it would be best if your vessels focused on transport and resource gathering. Leave the actual defense to races with more developed technology. Maya opened her mouth to object, but the words died in her throat as she watched the tactical display. The Nexari vessel's energy output was barely at 2%. They were essentially idling. The Thunderchild's most powerful weapons couldn't even scratch their shields, while they could slice through Earth's best defenses with what amounted to a warning shot. We appreciate your feedback, Commander. Maya manage. Professional mask firmly in place. End simulation. A holographic overlay faded, though the scorch mark on the hull remained very real. Around her, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Humanity had reached for the stars, dreaming of joining a galactic community. None of them had expected to be relegated to the kids' table quite so quickly. As Maya drafted her report for Earth Command, she couldn't shake the Nexari commander's final transmitted message. Don't feel too discouraged. Every species goes through this phase. Focus on what you're good at. Your agricultural worlds show promise, and your mining operations might be useful with proper oversight. After all, someone needs to handle the physical labor, while the advanced races handle the real work of defending the galaxy. The words burned worse than the laser had. Humanity had fought its way to the stars, unified their world, and built what they thought was a formidable fleet. Now they were being patted on the head and told to stick to farming. Maya's report ended with a single line: current military technology, insufficient for coalition integration. Recommended status, support roles only. She'd never written anything that hurt more to type. Watch your step, Dr. Walker. That patch of hull is from the Perseus incident, still radioactive. Dr. Amanda Walker ignored the warning from her environmental suit's AI as she climbed over the twisted remains of what had once been a battlecruiser's bow section. The massive orbital scrapyard around her stretched out in all directions, a three-dimensional maze of humanity's failed attempts to reach the stars. Most people saw garbage. She saw potential. Radiation levels within acceptable parameters, she muttered, taking another reading with her handheld scanner. And would you look at that alloy composition? They don't make them like this anymore. Her suit's heads-up display highlighted points of interest in the debris field, the remnants of rail gun platforms, missile tubes, and armor plating from a dozen different eras of human space combat. 6 months after the coalition integration debacle, Earth's military had practically dumped their entire fleet into orbit, desperately trying to reverse-engineer alien energy weapons instead. Dr. Walker, her comm crackled. The Defense Committee is requesting your presence at the development review. You're already 20 minutes late. Amanda sighed, watching a chunk of what might have been a destroyer's point defense turret float past. Tell them I'm conducting field research. They say if you miss another review, they'll reassign you to the Energy Weapons Division. That got her attention. The last thing she needed was to be stuck in a lab with the other scientists, all of them frantically trying to copy coalition technology they barely understood. She'd seen that pattern before in her extensive study of military history. Younger civilizations trying to match their more advanced rivals usually ended up with poor imitations at best. Fine, she groaned, engaging her suit's maneuvering thrusters. But I'm bringing a sample. Using her suit's grappling system, Amanda snagged the floating turret section and began her return journey through the debris field. The scrapyard's official designation was Orbital Recycling Zone 7, but most people called it the graveyard. Billions of dollars worth of military hardware, now considered obsolete, turned into the world's most expensive junkyard. 20 minutes later, she walked into the Defense Committee's chamber, still in her environmental suit, and dragging the turret component behind her. The committee members, a mix of military officers and civilian scientists, stared at her with their usual mix of frustration and disappointment. Dr. Walker, General Santos began, we expected your report on potential energy weapon adaptations for existing platforms. Instead, you spent the last month climbing through garbage. Care to explain? Amanda smiled, patting the turret section. This garbage is from the UES constellation, built in 2142. Look at the targeting mechanism. She pried open a panel, revealing intricate machinery within. They solved the tracking problem for hypervelocity projectiles by using a magnetic field array instead of traditional computing. We threw this innovation away because the coalition made it seem obsolete. Because it is obsolete, Dr. Harrison cut in from his seat. I've seen coalition point defense systems up close. They don't need complex tracking systems because their energy weapons travel at light speed. There's no projectile motion to calculate. Exactly. Amanda's eyes lit up. They never needed to solve certain problems because their technology developed differently. But look at their ships, all energy-focused. Their hulls are relatively thin because their shields do all the work. What happens when those shields fail? An irrelevant question, Harrison scoffed. Their shields don't fail. We couldn't even scratch them with our best weapons. Amanda pulled up a holographic display, showing the debris field. Every piece of technology out there represents a problem humanity had to solve. Problems the coalition skipped entirely. They've spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons and shields, but when's the last time they had to think about actual physical impact? The room fell silent as her words sank in. General Santos leaned forward. What exactly are you suggesting, Doctor? I'm suggesting. Amanda grinned, that while everyone else tries to copy their energy weapons, we should be looking at what they've never had to defend against. Every piece of garbage up there represents a different approach to warfare, approaches they've forgotten about. She gestured to the turret. This isn't obsolete technology. It's just waiting for the right application. The Coalition thinks we're primitive because we still throw rocks. Maybe it's time we showed them just how far humanity has advanced the art of throwing rocks. The general's expression remained neutral, but there was a glint in his eye. You have 1 month to show us something concrete, Doctor. After that, it's energy weapons research for you. Amanda nodded, already mentally calculating the mass ratios she'd need for her next experiment. Sometimes the best way forward was to look backward first. Play it again, Dr. Amanda Walker commanded, her eyes fixed on the ancient footage. The holographic display flickered as it repeated the centuries-old video of a railgun test from 2025. She'd watched it 17 times now, but something about the way the projectile behaved was nagging at her mind. Her lab, if you could call it that, was a repurposed cargo bay aboard the Scrapyard's main station. Pieces of salvaged military hardware covered every surface, and a makeshift testing chamber dominated one wall. 3 weeks into her month-long deadline, and she was watching historical footage instead of running experiments. Dr. Walker, her lab assistant, James Chen, called from across the room. The gravitational field manipulator you requested just arrived from Coalition Supplies. Cost us half our annual budget. Worth every credit, Amanda muttered, still watching the footage. James, what do you notice about the projectile's trajectory? He squinted at the display. It's straight. Railguns fire in straight lines. That's basic physics. Exactly. She jumped up, startling him. They fire straight because that's all we could manage with the technology of the time. But look at what we have now. She gestured to the Coalition device James had just brought in. They use gravitational fields for everything. Shields, propulsion, cargo moving. But they never combined it with physical projectiles because they never needed to. James frowned. Because energy weapons are more advanced. No, Amanda grinned, because they never had our history of throwing things at problems. Hand me that piece of scrap metal. She grabbed a twisted chunk of hull plating and placed it in front of the gravitational manipulator. Her fingers flew across the control panel, inputting calculations she'd been working on for weeks. The Coalition's energy weapons are incredibly powerful, she explained, but they're predictable. Energy moves in straight lines unless deflected. Their shields are designed to handle that. But what if? She activated the device. The piece of scrap metal lifted into the air, caught in the gravitational field. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of floating statically, it began to spin, accelerating as the field intensified. That's not supposed to happen. James backed away nervously. No, it's exactly what's supposed to happen. Amanda's eyes lit up. The field isn't uniform. I modified it based on those old railgun principles. It's creating a spiral acceleration pattern. The metal isn't just being pushed. It's being spun like a bullet through a rifle barrel, but in 3 dimensions. The scrap piece was now spinning so fast, it was just a blur. Warning indicators flashed across her control panel. Maybe we should shut it down, James suggested, taking another step back. Just one more adjustment. Amanda tweaked the field strength. The next few seconds happened in slow motion. The gravitational field pulsed, and the spinning piece of metal shot forward with incredible speed. It pierced through the lab's reinforced testing chamber like it was paper, then through the outer wall, and continued into space through 3 more layers of station hull. Emergency sirens blared as containment fields snapped into place over the breaches. James stared at the holes with his mouth open. That, Amanda breathed, was with 1 small piece of scrap and 5% power. You just shot a hole through half the station, James exclaimed. Yes, but think about what this means. She was already pulling up simulation models. The gravitational field doesn't just accelerate the projectile. It creates a spiral motion that makes it drill through anything in its path. No straight lines for shields to deflect. And if we scale it up, she grabbed more pieces of scrap metal, dropping them into the testing area. We can create a field that accelerates multiple pieces simultaneously. Imagine thousands of fragments, all spinning in different vectors. A cloud of hypersonic shrapnel that can't be predicted or deflected. We're not just throwing rocks anymore. We're conducting a symphony of kinetic destruction. James looked at the holes in the station, then back at her manic grin. The committee's going to want to catch your name, then gravitational spiral acceleration weapon. Amanda watched the emergency repair drones already at work on the hull breach. Call it the Starshred drive, because that's exactly what it's going to do to anything in its path. She quickly began documenting the test results, already planning the next iteration. They had 1 week left before her deadline, and she'd just blown half a dozen holes in Coalition property. But for the first time since humanity joined the Galactic community, she felt like they might have a real chance at earning respect. Now she just had to figure out how to demonstrate it without destroying any more stations. The Nexari commander, who had once mocked Earth's primitive weapons, died screaming, their final transmission cut short as their ship's energy core overloaded. Across Coalition space, similar scenes played out with terrifying regularity. The mighty energy weapons of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations weren't just failing, they were becoming liabilities. In the Coalition Emergency Command Center, Dr. Amanda Walker watched the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers representing fallen worlds multiplied like a virus spreading across the galactic map. Each lost system represented billions of lives, and humanity could only watch from the sidelines. "Replay the Nexari defense footage," ordered High Marshal Kaxan, their crystalline form glowing dimly with barely contained rage. The holographic display shifted, showing the last stand of the Nexari defense fleet. The Void Swarm vessels appeared almost beautiful in their organic horror, massive, whale-like shapes that seemed to swim through space itself. Their surfaces rippled with bioluminescent patterns, and their hulls were alive, literally healing from any damage they sustained. But it was their method of attack that chilled everyone to the bone. "Energy absorption complete," the analyst reported, highlighting the sequence. The Nexari capital ships unleashed their full arsenal, enough power to shatter a small moon. The swarm vessels, they just opened their maws and consumed it, turned it into biomass. Then they used that same energy to power their own weapons. Amanda leaned forward, studying the footage. Their ships are organic, completely biological. A civilization that chose evolution over engineering, confirmed Science Director Veltek, their tentacles writhing nervously. "We've never encountered anything like them. Our energy weapons don't just fail, they make them stronger. Each attack feeds them, and they're learning to process the energy more efficiently with each engagement." The display shifted to another battle. This time, a Kalarathi battle group tried a different approach, attempting to overload the swarm ships with concentrated energy fire from multiple vectors. The organic vessels simply split their hulls open like blooming flowers, absorbing the attack from all directions. 15 worlds lost in 7 days. High Marshal Kaxan's voice crackled with distortion, a sign of extreme distress in their species. "Our strongest weapons are useless. Our shields mean nothing. They simply phase their biomatter through the energy barriers. 3,000 years of military advancement, rendered obsolete by these abominations." Amanda's mind raced, connecting dots that only someone with her unique perspective might see. "Have you tried physical weapons? Kinetic impacts?" The Coalition leaders turned to her, some seemingly noticing the human representative for the first time. "Projectile weapons," Veltek's translator barely conveyed their incredulity. "Against ships that can absorb the power of our most advanced energy weapons. That would be like throwing pebbles at a dreadnought." "Exactly." Amanda pulled up her own data files. "Your civilizations have focused on energy weapons for millennia. These Void Swarm ships have evolved specifically to counter that threat. But when's the last time they had to deal with something as simple as a metal slug moving at relativistic speeds? She displayed footage from her Starshard tests. Their ability to absorb energy is impressive, but they still have mass. They still have to obey the laws of physics. You can't absorb or redirect kinetic energy from multiple vectors simultaneously without compromising structural integrity, organic or not. High Marshal Kaxan's crystalline form pulsed with sudden interest. You believe your weapon system could harm them? I believe. Amanda chose her words carefully. That humanity's primitive approach might be exactly what we need. The swarm evolved to counter energy weapons, but evolution has to be pushed by external pressure. They never needed to develop defenses against mass drivers or kinetic kill vehicles because no advanced civilization would use such basic weapons. The tactical display flashed again as another world went dark. The coalition leaders shared looks that Amanda was learning to read as desperate hope. Even if you're right, Veltec wavered. Your Starshard system is untested in actual combat. And one weapon won't be enough to turn this war. Amanda smiled grimly. Good thing we have entire scrapyards full of obsolete weapons, then. And about 300 years of experience in finding new ways to throw very heavy objects very fast. High Marshal Kaxan straightened to their full height. How quickly can you begin production? That depends, Amanda replied, on how quickly you can get me access to your gravitational field technology. It's time to show the galaxy why humanity never stopped improving our primitive weapons. Behind them, the tactical display blinked as another world fell to the swarm. They were running out of time to prove her theory right. Dr. Amanda Walker's boots echoed through the Coalition Council chamber as she wheeled in what looked like a garbage bin. The assembled alien representatives, those who hadn't fled their worlds yet, stared in bewilderment as she positioned it in the center of the presentation area. Dr. Walker, Supreme Counselor Zexnav's translating crystal chimed with barely contained impatience. We were promised a weapon demonstration. Instead, you bring us refuse. Amanda checked the seals on her reinforced presentation chamber, a transparent barrier separating the council from her demonstration area. My holographic projector crashed. Coalition technology doesn't always play nice with human systems, so we're doing this the old-fashioned way. She reached into the bin and pulled out a twisted piece of metal, holding it up. This is a fragment from the UES Thunderchild's hull, the same ship your patrol vessel embarrassed during our integration trials. Back then, you called our weapons primitive. Today, that primitive approach might save your civilization. The council chamber's atmosphere turned frigid as several energy-based species flickered with barely contained indignation. You dare mock our losses, a crystalline being pulsed angrily. While you waste our time with garbage, 3 more systems have gone dark. Not mocking, Amanda pulled out her modified gravitational manipulator. Teaching. Your civilizations mastered energy manipulation thousands of years ago. You forgot about physical warfare because you never needed it. But the Void Swarm, she activated the device, causing the metal fragment to float. They evolved to counter energy weapons specifically. They never had to adapt to this. The fragment began to spin, caught in the Starshard drive's gravitational field. Several council members leaned forward, their species-specific sensory organs focusing on the display. Interesting physics application, noted a gaseous being, but hardly a weapon capable of. The rest of their statement was cut off by a sound like ripping steel. The fragment, now spinning so fast it was just a blur, launched forward. It punched through 3 layers of reinforced battle plate, the same material used in coalition capital ships, before embedding itself in the chamber's far wall. Silence fell. The council members stared at the neat holes, then back at Amanda. That was one piece of scrap, she continued, at 10% power. Now, she appended the entire bin into the testing area. Hundreds of metal fragments floated in the gravitational field. Let me show you what happens when we really open it up. The Starshard drive hummed to life. The cloud of debris began to spin, each piece finding its own orbit in the gravitational maelstrom. When she triggered the release, it was like a miniature galaxy of metal had exploded. The fragments ripped through the battle plates in a spreading pattern, turning the reinforced materials into Swiss cheese. By the first light, breathed Supreme Counselor Zexinav. The energy readings. There are none. Our sensors can't track the fragments because they're not powered. They're just moving. Exactly. Amanda smiled grimly. The void swarm evolved to absorb energy, but they still have to obey physics. They can't absorb or adapt to simple kinetic impacts, especially not thousands of them from multiple vectors simultaneously. Their organic hulls might heal quickly, but they have to have mass to exist, and anything with mass can be shredded. She gestured to the devastated battle plates. Earth's orbital scrapyards are filled with obsolete weapons and ships. Millions of tons of potential ammunition. We've spent centuries perfecting the art of throwing very heavy things very fast. Now we just need to combine that experience with your gravitational technology. The council chamber erupted in overlapping translations as representatives began arguing. Supreme Counselor Zexnav raised their primary appendage for silence. You propose to arm our fleet with garbage, they asked. I propose, Amanda corrected, to show you why humanity never stopped improving our kinetic weapons. The Void Swarm expects energy weapons. They've never faced a civilization primitive enough to think of turning space debris into a weapon. She paused. Of course, if you'd rather keep feeding them power with your energy weapons. Another world's distress beacon went silent on the tactical display. The council members watched the red marker fade, then turned back to the shredded battle plates. How quickly can you begin retrofitting our ships? Supreme Counselor Zexnav asked. Amanda allowed herself a small smile. How quickly can you get me access to your scrapyards? Salvage fleet in position. Captain Maya Reynolds reported from the bridge of the refitted Thunderchild. The former battleship now bristled with Starshred drive arrays, its missile tubes and railguns replaced with massive debris collection systems. Behind it, a dozen converted cargo haulers moved into formation, their holds packed with scrap metal from 3 different species orbital junkyards. Dr. Amanda Walker stood at the tactical station, watching the sensor feeds. Coalition forces are clear of the engagement zone. Void swarm vessels approaching at standard attack velocity. She checked the targeting solutions one final time. They're maintaining their usual formation. They still think we're going to hit them with energy weapons. The tactical display showed 5 massive swarm ships, their organic hulls pulsing with stolen energy from their previous victories. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. All ships, execute deployment pattern Delta. Maya commanded. Time to show them why you should never underestimate human ingenuity. The salvage fleet split into pre-planned positions, creating a 3-dimensional net around the approaching swarm vessels. The cargo haulers began releasing their loads, massive clouds of debris spreading out into carefully calculated firing zones. Enemy vessels entering optimal range, Amanda announced. They're opening their energy absorption vents. They're expecting a standard coalition attack run. Maya allowed herself a grim smile. Let's disappoint them. All ships, activate Starshred drives on my mark. She waited 3 heartbeats, watching the swarm ships settle into their defensive formation. Mark. Across the battlefield, dozens of gravitational fields sprang to life. The scattered debris, everything from ancient hull plating to broken support struts, began to spin and accelerate. The effect was like watching several galaxies' worth of metallic stars beginning to dance. Swarm ships are detecting the gravitational disturbance, Amanda reported. There, they appear to be confused. No energy signatures for them to absorb. Execute attack pattern Shredder, Maya ordered. Full dispersal. The gravitational fields pulsed in synchronized harmony, and hell broke loose in space. Hundreds of thousands of metal fragments accelerated to relativistic speeds, creating an expanding sphere of hypervelocity shrapnel that no energy shield could stop. Because there was no energy to stop. The first swarm ship died almost beautifully. Its organic hull, evolved to absorb and redirect energy, had no defense against the laws of physics. The metal storm shredded through it like paper, the fragments tumbling and spinning in random vectors that made them impossible to track or evade. The creature's death scream echoed across all frequencies as its body broke apart. Multiple impacts confirmed. Amanda's voice rose with excitement. Their regeneration can't keep up with the damage rate. Hull integrity failing across all targets. The remaining swarm ships tried to adapt, their surfaces rippling as they attempted to grow new defenses. But evolution needed time, and the Starshred drive gave them none. The second and third vessels died as ingloriously as the first, torn apart by humanity's primitive weapons. They're trying to retreat, Maya noted with satisfaction. Executing containment protocol. The salvage fleet tightened their formation, adjusting their gravitational fields to create a killing zone. The fourth swarm ship died trying to power through the metal storm, its massive body split into chunks by the relentless barrage. The final vessel, perhaps realizing the magnitude of their mistake, attempted something unprecedented. It tried to surrender. The organic ship extruded communication tendrils, broadcasting on all frequencies. "We're receiving a transmission," Amanda reported. They're asking how we did it. They want to understand what kind of energy weapon could bypass their defenses. Maya looked at the tactical display, where the shredded remains of 4 swarm ships drifted in the void. "Send them our response." Amanda keyed in the pre-prepared message. This wasn't an energy weapon. This was humanity reminding the galaxy that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. These are the same basic principles our ancestors used to defend themselves with spears and arrows. We just never stopped improving them. The last swarm ship's surrender was officially recorded as the first Coalition victory against the invasion. The footage of the battle spread across Coalition space like wildfire, showing advanced civilizations that humanity's primitive approach had accomplished what thousands of years of energy weapon development could not. As salvage crews began collecting both debris and biological samples from the battlefield, Maya turned to Amanda. "Think they'll still tell us to stick to farming?" Amanda watched as Coalition ships began transmitting requests for primitive weapon retrofitting. "Somehow, I doubt it." "You want me to do what?" Dr. Amanda Walker stared at the holographic request form floating in front of her. The document bore the seals of 17 different Coalition species, all demanding her presence at their military academies. "They're calling it the Renaissance of Physical Combat," James explained, scrolling through more incoming messages. Every major Coalition power is scrambling to understand what they've been missing. The Nexari are offering their entire surplus fleet in exchange for your weapons consultancy. Amanda watched through the observation window as another wave of alien ships lined up for Starshred drive installation. The orbital shipyards around Earth, once filled with obsolete human vessels, now bustled with activity as Coalition engineers worked alongside human technicians. "The crystalline Concordat is particularly interested," James continued. "They've already begun experimenting with combining their photonic resonance technology with kinetic impact principles. Apparently, they're calling it the Walker method of hybrid warfare." "That's horrifying," Amanda muttered, but she couldn't hide her smile. "What about the Scrapyard situation?" "That's the best part." James pulled up another report. "Remember how the Coalition used to mock our orbital debris problem? Now they're paying premium rates for access to our junk fields. The Methan Kingdoms just offered to trade their most advanced shield technology for exclusive rights to the Perseus sector wreckage." A flash of light through the window drew their attention. In the testing range, the Coalition vessel was demonstrating their new hybrid weapon system, a combination of traditional energy beams and physically accelerated crystalline shards. The target drone didn't just get destroyed, it ceased to exist. "They're learning fast," Amanda observed. "Once they stop dismissing physical combat as primitive, their innovation rate is incredible. The Void Swarm won't know what hit them." Speaking of hits, James brought up the tactical overview. Green markers now outnumbered red across the galactic map. The counteroffensive is working. The swarm's biological adaptation can't keep up with the variety of attacks they're facing. Every coalition species is developing their own version of hybrid weapons, combining their energy expertise with physical warfare principles. Through another window, Amanda watched as salvage drones stripped a derelict human cruiser. Its components would be recycled into ammunition for the next generation of Starshred weapons. The sight of aliens eagerly repurposing human junk still felt surreal. The Void Swarm lost 3 more high ships yesterday, James reported. The Mercurian battle group used a modified version of your gravitational field principle, but they added rotating plasma conduits to superheat the projectiles. Turns out superheated shrapnel works even better against organic hulls. Amanda flipped through the battle reports. Each coalition species had taken the basic premise of the Starshred drive and adapted it to their unique technologies. The Gaseous Collective had developed a way to freeze particles of their own atmosphere into hypersonic projectiles. The Silicon Mines were experimenting with programmable matter that could reconfigure itself mid-flight for maximum damage. Commander Reynolds sent an update from the front. James added with a grin. The Nexeri patrol fleet that mocked the Thunderchild last year. They've formally requested human officers to train their crews in physical combat principles. Apparently, they want to understand the subtle artistry of throwing rocks really hard. A high-priority message flashed across their screens. Another Void Swarm high ship had emerged from deep space. But unlike previous encounters, the Coalition response was immediate and coordinated. Ships from a dozen species converged on the target, each bringing their own unique blend of energy and physical weapons. They're not just copying us anymore, Amanda realized, watching the feeds. They're taking what we showed them and building on it, creating entirely new forms of warfare that combine the best of both approaches. The battle was brief and decisive. The high ship, evolved to handle pure energy attacks, had no defense against the devastating combination of superheated projectiles, crystalline shrapnel, and gravitationally accelerated debris. Its death throes were recorded and analyzed by eager coalition scientists, each looking for ways to improve their hybrid weapons further. Dr. Walker. James interrupted her thoughts. The Coalition War College is requesting your presence. They want to establish a permanent faculty position for physical combat theory. Amanda watched as another flight of alien ships arrived for retrofitting, their holds filled with what they once considered worthless debris. Tell them I'll consider it. But first, I want to see what the Silicon Mines are working on. Someone needs to make sure they don't forget the basics while they're reinventing warfare. After all, she thought, watching the organized chaos of humans and aliens working together, sometimes the best way to advance was to remember where you came from. The final Void Swarm high ship didn't die in a glorious battle. Instead, it surrendered after watching a demonstration of the Coalition's newest hybrid weapon systems. The massive organic vessel, faced with weapons it couldn't adapt to fast enough, chose evolution of a different kind. Survival through adaptation to peace. Dr. Amanda Walker stood in the newly christened Walker Combat Academy's main hall, watching as alien students from across the galaxy practiced what the Coalition now called unified combat theory. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same Scrapyard where she'd developed the Starshred drive had been converted into the galaxy's premier military training facility. Professor Walker, a crystalline cadet, approached, their facets glowing with excitement. We've been studying Earth's historical combat archives. Is it true your species once used something called a slingshot to defeat a superior opponent? David versus Goliath. Amanda smiled, remembering her own fascination with military history. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Speaking of which, how's your projectile physics calculation coming along? The cadet's glow dimmed slightly. I still don't understand why we need to learn manual targeting when we have quantum computers for calculations. Because, a familiar voice interrupted, computers can fail. Energy weapons can be countered. But physics? Physics never stops working. Captain Maya Reynolds, now Admiral Reynolds of the combined Coalition fleet, walked into the hall. Her uniform bore the patches of both Earth's Defense Force and the Coalition Navy, a symbol of how far humanity had come. "Admiral on deck," someone called, and the training hall snapped to attention. At ease, Maya waved them back to their studies. "Just here to check on our latest graduating class. How are they doing, Professor?" Amanda gestured to the training area, where students from 17 different species practiced various combat forms. A gaseous being was learning to compress their own atmosphere into projectiles. A silicon-based life form was practicing with programmable matter bullets. Even the energy-based species had learned to appreciate the value of physical combat. "They're learning that true innovation doesn't mean abandoning the past," Amanda replied. "Each species brings their own perspective, their own technologies. But they all understand now. The best defense is one your enemy hasn't evolved to counter." Through the hall's massive windows, they could see the transformed solar system. Earth's once embarrassing debris fields had become strategic resources. The scrapyards now housed research facilities where Coalition scientists studied ways to combine physical and energy-based warfare. The Void Swarm's biological samples proved interesting, Maya noted, watching a group of students examining a preserved piece of organic hull. Their ability to absorb energy is being adapted for shield technology. Turns out our primitive approach didn't just defeat them. It helped advance Coalition science in ways pure energy research never could. A chime sounded, and the main hall's holographic display activated. It showed the latest graduation statistics. 97% of Coalition combat vessels now incorporated some form of physical warfare capability. The words, Earth Combat Doctrine, had become synonymous with military innovation. "Did you ever imagine," Maya asked, "when you were digging through that scrapyard, that you'd end up revolutionizing galactic warfare?" Amanda watched as an Nexari instructor, from the same species that had once mocked Earth's weapons, demonstrated proper gravitational field manipulation for kinetic ammunition. "I just wanted to prove that humanity's approach wasn't primitive, that there was value in understanding the basics before reaching for the advanced solutions." The Academy's motto floated above them in holographic script, translated into every Coalition language. "Innovation remembers its roots." The Coalition Defense Council is recommending your next paper be required reading at all military academies, Maya added. "What was it called again?" "Physical and Energy. The Unified Theory of Combat," Amanda replied. Though the students have a different name for it. They call it How Humans Taught the Galaxy to Throw Rocks. Outside, a training squadron of Coalition ships practiced their maneuvers. Energy weapons flashed alongside streams of accelerated debris, creating a display that looked almost like a dance. The Galaxy had learned that true advancement didn't mean abandoning the past. It meant building upon it. "Ready to review the new hybrid weapon proposals?" Maya asked. The Silicon Mines have some interesting ideas about combining their crystal technology with kinetic principles. Amanda took one last look at her students, the future of Coalition defense, each learning that sometimes the oldest solutions were the best foundations for new innovations. Let's see what they've come up with. After all, there's always room for improvement. Even in the age of energy weapons and faster-than-light travel, the fundamental principles remain the same. The Galaxy had finally learned what humanity never forgot. Sometimes you just need to throw a rock. You just have to be clever about how you throw it.